Nobody's perfect is such a common saying, but again, it is often used to facilitate foolishness and often used to encourage women in particular to accept things that are actually quite frankly unacceptable and things that they don't have to accept. And we're always talking about self authority here. And we do live in a world that is constantly telling women what is and what is not tolerable, what is and is not acceptable, as if people know your nervous system, your mental capacity and bandwidth. But a lot of the time, systems of power don't actually care about how much women are enduring, tolerating, and having to be long suffering around, particularly when it comes to women playing certain roles that the system needs you to play, such as being somebody's wife and being a mother. This is one of the reasons why when you look at motherhood in itself, which in itself can be viewed as a system of power, because there are often very narrow ways women can show up in motherhood in a way that is deemed to be adequate and motherly. Okay, this is why we have this constant tension at times between working mothers and stay-at-home mothers. It's an unnecessary tension, but it exists because ultimately the women who are mothers are attempting to perform the type of motherhood that society says is acceptable. And of course, it's often wrapped and cloaked in all manner of arguments around what children really need, their child development, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these days you see so much. There are commentators and writers who will say that women are fundamentally damaging their children forever if they work while their children are young, for example, which is funny because women all over the world have worked. This idea that women have always stayed at home and been the ones in the home in the formative years is false. When you look culturally across the world, globally, okay, there's always been some type of work that women are actually doing. Working class women have always worked. When you look about, for example, black women who were slaves in certain places in the world, they were the work, as were their children. And what I'm saying overall here is that you can't win, essentially. But what happens nowadays is where women have more choices, more agency, and they have access to resources, they can literally walk the walk and make a different choice. And quite often what you see is that people, and when I say people, it's women and men, encouraging women to remain in situations that they don't want to be in, or they legitimately have assessed that they shouldn't be in for their own well-being, safety, peace, or just joy. Okay, they will tell you that nobody's perfect. Okay, and also I've also noticed this other piece whereby the word happiness, again, is very much being presented as this kind of ethereal, transitory emotion. Now, granted, it is true. Happiness is actually quite difficult to nail down as a state of being, as an emotion, as a state of mind. And when you look at the studies that have been done on happiness more generally, it is true, for example, if you're looking at the happiness index in relation to money, it is true that after a certain amount of money, happiness does not significantly increase. But what I do see is that women are often being infantilized, and the yearning for happiness, whatever that means to you as a woman, is being trivialized, and women are being told that you are immature, and you're not thinking and behaving like an adult if you expect to be happy in life. This is why you'll hear people say that, well, life is really hard. It's hard for everyone, right? It's not about being happy. If you don't feel happy, then tough. That kind of attitude when women say they left because they weren't happy. Now, I often think, of course, that the word happy is used more generally. It's used quite casually. But actually, if we start looking at somebody's well-being, we start thinking about whether someone feels inner peace, whether someone experiences joy. Those things are often more grounded, observable, and they're things that we can literally recognize in our body. Because one thing which is true is that no human being should have to live in sustained misery, in sustained depression, flatness, sadness, melancholy. Those are not things that any human being should have to live with. And what I have observed is a lot of the time we, as a society as a whole, we have begun to tolerate this and think that everybody is living like that, when in fact not everybody is. Even with all the ups and downs of life, it is more than possible to feel joy as a genuine state of being, regardless of maybe some of your external environment or circumstances. And I would never discourage a woman from, denying herself the uh, denying herself the actual opportunity to experience joy in a sustained way, experience inner peace. Now, the funny thing about this is that often this is only something that we can internally generate. It's not something that other people can do for us. We generally do accept, if you're mature, that nobody else can make you happy. But here's the irony: when a woman decides to internally and self-generate that happiness, and if that takes her to a place where she says, this isn't for me anymore, whether it's a marriage, a relationship, suddenly people have got a problem with you making that decision. Do you see how that works? So first we tell women happiness is not a real thing. Then we tell them actually it's nobody else's responsibility to make you happy. So if the woman starts honestly reflecting and thinking what makes me happy, and then decides actually what parts a part of what makes me happy is when I'm not here in this home with you, in this relationship with you, maybe in this marriage with you, in this friendship with you, it's now a problem for her to exercise that self-authority over her own happiness, right? Or joy, contentment, peace, etc. Suddenly now people start assessing and judging for her whether or not her feelings are valid, one, and two, whether or not what she's experiencing now is valid. I'll never forget seeing very interesting discourse around, is it Tamara Mowry? She obviously got a divorce, and I think there were a few interviews that she did where she talked about the challenges of being divorced, whether she felt happy, and a number of comments I saw where people said, well, why did you get divorced? Life is so much more complex than that, right? People end things and move on from things and transition from things all of the time by choice. And that doesn't mean that they immediately feel happy. That doesn't mean they don't ever regret parts of the decision or feel regretful temporarily or feel doubtful. Those things are normal. And what I find very interesting is that that is used often as an indictment against women. And people then want to say to you, well, you shouldn't have left then. Plenty of people, for example, leave religions and feel terrible loneliness, disorientation, confusion, sadness, pain, emotional turmoil. That doesn't mean that they made the wrong decision. That means that they're human. And actually the decision was complex. And so one thing as a woman you have to be aware of is that ultimately when you exercise self-authority, and if the result of you exercising that self-authority means that something changes for somebody else, you're no longer available or present for someone else, regardless of who it is. It can be parents, siblings, a partner, whatever it might be, a friend. You will always be positioned as the selfish one. And you have to be able to honestly self-reflect, because sometimes it's not always what we're doing, it might be the way we've done it. I often think that when I see a lot of these stories around, people who transition into another gender, but they were married to someone, often it's the way they've done it that can feel callous, that can feel dismissive, unkind, all of the things. Often the way they've done it matters and is what causes the pain. When you listen to people share their experiences and stories when they had a husband or a wife that transitioned, some people are very secretive while they transition. They may cheat on their partner while they transition. Same for people who are maybe confused about their sexuality and or hiding their sexuality. They may be dishonest. They may betray their vows. They may betray their partner. And in the process, they think it's justifiable. Sometimes it's about the way you've done it. Yes, you may be choosing to exercise your own self-authority and agency, but the way you do it also matters. And I know that these are difficult conversations, but I stand by that. If you truly respect somebody, you'll think about the way you do it. That does not mean that you have to stay if you don't want to. It is what it is sometimes in life. And so as women, you will always be positioned or portrayed as selfish, whimsical, trivial, lacking in meaning, all of those things when you make a decision that might require you to withdraw your presence, your company from someone else. Okay. And so when people say nobody's perfect, to encourage you almost to remain in a situation. And this, by the way, is not really just even about marriages. Sometimes it could be a friendship. It could be early days of dating and people say nobody's perfect. It could also be an established marriage where someone has exhibited behaviors that for you are not tolerable. We have to understand here that often you are being encouraged to override your own judgment. If someone lies repeatedly, cheats repeatedly, is financially irresponsible or unkind repeatedly, you can trust your own judgment on that. If someone demonstrates a pattern of selfishness, you can trust your own judgment. But what happens a lot of the time when you as a woman start to evaluate behavior and maybe even take yourself seriously, you're going to be told nobody's perfect. This was something that was very common in my former religion. Every day they're talking about imperfection, when quite frankly, some of the things that people would say and do went far below the threshold of imperfection. Far below. And you know what's funny actually, because in that religion, they teach the concept of imperfection and how sin entered into the world through an analogy, which is about a cake tin. So, of course, if a cake tin has a dent in it and you bake cakes in that cake tin, then every cake that comes out has the dent, right? And they use that to teach the concept of imperfection in humanity and how sinfulness entered into the world. Now, what I find very interesting about that is that sometimes the tin, you see, imperfection does not render an item completely useless. All right. So, for example, people buy secondhand furniture all the time, and they upholster the thing and it's now useful. They will use it in their home or they may sell it on. People will buy secondhand cars. The car may be used. But the thing is, if there's no engine in the car, that is not usable. Do you see the difference here? Right? So we have to be critical thinking, or we have to use critical thinking when we are evaluating someone's behavior, particularly when they or other people are saying, but nobody's perfect. You're not expecting perfection. And sometimes we're very obtuse about these things. Nobody's perfect. And this time the person is, doing things that fall below the threshold of acceptable behavior. And women are often conditioned in two directions when it comes to perfection simultaneously. First, women have to be perfect, by the way. You have to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect employee, the perfect Christian, the perfect Muslim, the perfect woman. You can't make a mistake. You can't exercise your own judgment. God forbid. In some cultures and religions, a woman might even look at a man. I was on a podcast recently where we were talking about religion and its impact on women more generally. And there are women sharing stories. They kissed the boy and their religion, made them apologize and treated them in certain, like the level of conduct that is often expected of women, even under pressure. I don't condone cheating on any level, not that it's my business. But see the difference in the way women are viewed and portrayed when they cheat versus men. It is deemed apparently acceptable and tolerable for a man to cheat. In fact, some women are literally raised to believe that that is going to happen anyway. That's just the way men are. Whereas when a woman cheats, apparently it's the end of the world. When a woman decides, you know what, I can't do this motherhood thing anymore, and she voluntarily gives up custody of her children, I always chuckle when I see that. Come and see the comments. Oh, I could never leave my kids. What kind of mother are you? We live in a society where men are allowed to leave whenever they want to. We live in a society where men are allowed to abandon and neglect their children without any social consequences, might I add. People will still deem that man to be a good man, a good friend, talented even. He will go on to date other women. Other women will date that man full well knowing he has children with somebody else that he doesn't feed and he doesn't clothe. They often remarry. We live in a world where that is completely acceptable. Where apparently it's understandable. There's always some reason as to why a man might have walked away, and it's always the woman's fault. It's always because she's crazy, she's bitter, she didn't let him see the children, We live in a world where that is the norm. We live in a world now where, it's okay for men not really to pull their weight in the home. It's okay for men to not really know the birth date of their child's school teacher, what the name of the school that the child is in. They don't even know the doctor's surgery details for their child. But when a woman apparently is the same, she's lazy. She's a bad mother. She's selfish. Have you noticed the talk that happens when women, she's got to find herself. People say it sarcastically. She's gone to find herself. She wanted to be happy. It's said with sarcasm. Because there's this attitude that women are reckless, they're selfish, they're fickle, they can't endure, which is very cheeky, really. Because actually the facts say very different. Generally speaking, we endure quite a lot as women. Right? And so when women do things like, well, do you know what? You have the children full time. Men aren't banking on that, you see? Men aren't banking on that for her to say, actually, you have them full time every day, 24/7, 7 days. I'll be the weekend mum. You see, if it's okay for men to go and pick up their kids once every other week between 12 noon and bring them back by 6 and not give them dinner, why isn't it okay for a woman to see her kids once every other week? Now, many of you will say that the biological imperative is different. Well, doesn't look like that these days, right? You are always going to be positioned, if you're less than perfect, as a bad woman, a selfish woman. You're not a good woman, all right? And so you must never expect too much either as a woman. You take what you get. Even though you must earn everything you're given, you must take what you get also, especially from men. You can't ask for more. You can't want more. I remember when I was growing up, one woman actually said to me, sometimes I do think about these women. Look, I try and have some level of grace because some of them were raised in completely different times and others of them completely male-centered. There's no other way to put it. But one woman said, well, men don't really do those things. And she was referring to a man picking up his own kids from school. And I remember I was 14 just looking at her and thinking, how pathetic is this? What do you mean men don't really do these things? Like the bar is so low, it's unbelievable. And so when you are conditioned and programmed to have to be perfect from girlhood onwards, otherwise there's consequences, sometimes punishment, it's an impossible dynamic. Because women are expected to maintain high standards for themselves while lowering standards for everybody else around them, specifically men, when it comes to interpersonal relationships, because nobody is perfect. And this is the thing that we have to remember. Imperfection is not an excuse for dysfunction. It is not an excuse for unhealthy behavior, right? You might be forgetful, occasionally late, socially awkward, maybe a bit messy, okay? You have bad days. Those are normal human imperfections. But things like repeated dishonesty, chronic irresponsibility, consistent disrespect, emotional manipulation, serial infidelity, refusal to take, these things are dysfunctional, they are unhealthy, they are intolerable. And look, there's no badges for being long-suffering when you are accepting foolishness. As there's a great content creator on TikTok, and she always says, Jules, there are no VIP seats in patriarchy. So where women are led to believe the more you endure, the more you survive, the better the woman you are. That is a lie. That is a lie. Because where they say that, what is it? Nothing can break. Some things can break you, actually. They can. And we see this borne out in women's health. Women have the highest rates of autoimmune diseases. And a lot of autoimmune diseases and cancers, by the way, come about through suppressed emotion, like anger. That is why women are so dysregulated. The nervous system is under constant pressure. When you are constantly suppressing your emotions, which is often the response, it's data and information that your body is surfacing that is often telling you that the reality of what you're experiencing is not tolerable. You don't have the capacity for it. And it's not because you're a bad woman. It's because you shouldn't have to endure it in the first place. And so when people tell you nobody's perfect, that is not helpful. It's not acceptable. Because what happens is a lot of the behaviors I listed as dysfunctional, unhealthy, and intolerable, downright disrespectful, quite often, they're not imperfections, they're patterns. And patterns matter. because patterns create outcomes like sickness. And one thing I vowed to myself is I'm not going to let my body get sick. I watched women around me get sick, and sometimes it seemed like these were like almost mystery illnesses. But actually, a lot of the time, it's because their system does not have the capacity and bandwidth to deal with their circumstances and the environment they're in. An environment they have been socialized and conditioned to believe is okay, because nobody's perfect, right? And so what happens is that even when women notice behavior, instead of discussing the behavior, society redirects attention. So if the woman says he lies, society says nobody's perfect. He cheated, nobody's perfect, right? So we redirect attention from what's actually happening and the impact it's having on you. So eventually you're no longer evaluating reality at all. You're now defending yourself against the accusations of being unreasonable, selfish, and not a good woman. But also you are separated from your own judgment, because now you spend all your time trying to rationalize, justify to yourself quite often that you are weak. You lack patience. You're lacking in grace. I saw this in my own former religion all the time. And really and truly, it's not an idiosyncrasy. It's not imperfection. It is actually unhealthy, dysfunctional, downright unacceptable behavior. Right? The fact of the matter is, imperfection does not render something useless. We value diamonds. Diamonds have value and meaning. Okay? The flaws are assessed in a diamond, though. That's the difference. We recognize that diamonds have imperfections, but we still assess them. Yeah, a jeweler will still measure and assess the imperfection in a diamond and then still put some value on it. Okay, the same is true of houses, businesses, investments, vehicles. We assess them for what they are. You don't pretend that the roof is not leaking when you go to buy an old Victorian house. Yeah? You don't pretend that there's not a scratch on the side of a car, a second-hand car, when you're buying it. You don't pretend when you're buying a business or valuing a business that there may be some areas, some bottlenecks in the systems and the processes, or there's some dead weight in the employees. We assess them in the light of reality, and we value it accordingly. Adults evaluate patterns. We don't pretend that the flaws don't exist, and we make decisions accordingly. This is why it's so important that you don't allow people to encourage you to abandon the process of evaluation and then to listen to what your body and your sense is telling you. Because this is the other thing. Women are often convinced to ignore their body. We're told that we're too emotional. This is why I get so annoyed when I see women playing into this idea that during periods that women are just stupid. No, the body is surfacing valuable data for you. Some of it is discomfort, some of it is pain, but that doesn't mean you're stupid. And it doesn't mean that you're stupid the rest of the time because of it. I heard a woman the other day say that women only have 4 days a month where they're thinking correctly. Like, again, you think that you're doing a thing by playing into these narratives. It's not true. This is why we see in healthcare women's pain and symptoms are ignored. When women are in pain during childbirth, they've got a partner that says, no, you don't need pain relief. How would you know? This is why women can have cancers and all sorts and be completely ignored and dismissed until it's too late. Your body surfaces worthwhile data and information. Do not play into this foolishness. It is possible to recognize that as women, we often experience pain. And that our moods absolutely can be affected by a cycle. That does not make you stupid. That does not mean that you've lost all sense and ability to judge reality. Don't play into those dynamics, because all it does is continue to infantilize you. And what happens is you are separated from your own judgment. Now, here's the thing, and I'll close around here, is that, look, you will be encouraged in life when you are a mature person and you recognize that we are all imperfect, yeah? That you will choose at times to show grace. But grace without judgment is dangerous, yeah? Compassion is valuable. So is mercy when it's appropriate. But you must always use your judgment here. Okay? Compassion without discernment is dangerous. I will never forget when I learned this. Ruinous empathy. You might think you're being empathetic by allowing people to take liberties, to exploit you, to take advantage of you. Ruinous empathy. Many a woman has been ruined because of misplaced, misdirected empathy. Okay? Forgiveness without accountability is a problem. Forgiveness, by the way, does not mean reconciliation either. Yeah? We're often taught as women to extend endless grace to others while simultaneously withholding judgment that would protect us, that would dignify us. And you might think that you're being kind, like I say, and empathetic. No, what happens is self-abandonment. It's a dilution of your self-respect. And let me tell you something. In the end, somebody who keeps stepping over the line, they don't respect you. The more gracious, more patient, what it does is it accelerates. The bad behavior accelerates. This is why I have always decided I don't reward bad behavior, because I've been in one or two situations, especially in my younger days. Yeah, you think that the more you love, the more loyalty you show. No. What it does is it accelerates the disrespect. Because what you are showing them is that you don't respect yourself and that there aren't any consequences when they take liberties with you. So it's really important, like I say, to dial in when people keep telling you that nobody's perfect as an excuse. And this is one of the things that you can explore in the invisible contract audit workbook, because one by one you can look at some of these invisible contracts and how they're showing up in your life. And then you have the opportunity to trust your judgment so that you can assess which ones you still want to obey.